The Arizona sun, a relentless, unforgiving orb, beat down on the asphalt ribbon of US-93. It was late afternoon on a sweltering August day in 2008, the kind of heat that made the very air shimmer and dance above the endless desert floor. Mark Jensen, 40 years old, a man whose hands were as calloused as the steering wheel he gripped, hummed a forgotten tune as his Peterbilt 379 thundered north, a massive silver tanker trailer trailing behind. For 15 years, this was his life: the rhythm of the road, the lonely stretches of highway, the brief respites in truck stops, and the knowledge that at the end of every run, his family waited. Mark was a creature of habit, a man whose reliability was as predictable as the sunrise. Every Tuesday, a call to Sarah, his wife, from the same spot, just past the turnoff for Nothing, Arizona, where the signal briefly strengthened. Every Thursday, a check-in with dispatch from Kingman. He wasn't a talker, but he was a presence. A devoted husband to Sarah, a patient father to their two children, 10-year-old Emily and 8-year-old David. He sent postcards, often simple, sometimes goofy, from forgotten towns along his routes. He was the anchor of their small, comfortable life in a quiet Phoenix suburb. This particular run was familiar, a fuel delivery from the terminal south of Phoenix up to Las Vegas. He'd left early that morning, kissed Sarah and the kids goodbye, promising to be back by Friday night, just in time for their traditional pizza and movie night. "Don't wait up for me, honey," he'd said, a tired smile gracing his lips, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "But save me a slice of pepperoni." The last contact anyone had with Mark Jensen was that Tuesday call. Sarah remembered it vividly. He'd sounded tired, a little more worn than usual. The heat was getting to him, he'd said. "Just past Nothing, about to hit some patchy service, babe. I'll call you when I get to Kingman." That was it. A routine call, a routine promise. Wednesday morning came and no call from Kingman. Sarah wasn't worried immediately. Sometimes the dispatch system glitched, sometimes Mark got held up, or maybe he was just trying to catch some sleep before the next leg. But by Wednesday afternoon, the knot of anxiety began to tighten in her stomach. She tried his cell phone repeatedly, straight to voicemail. She called his dispatch. They hadn't heard from him since he'd cleared Phoenix. His truck, a gleaming silver behemoth, had a transponder. Its last reported ping placed it roughly 30 miles north of Nothing, Arizona, on a seldom-used service road that branched off US-93, near a long-abandoned mining access point. An odd place for a detour. Panic set in. Sarah called the Arizona Department of Public Safety. They contacted the Mohave County Sheriff's Office, whose jurisdiction covered that desolate stretch of highway. Sheriff Ben Thompson, a man whose face was etched with the desert's harsh realities, took the call himself. Thompson knew the territory like the back of his hand, its hidden dangers and its unforgiving vastness. He dispatched a patrol unit immediately. Hours later, as the desert sky turned from fiery orange to bruised purple, the patrol car's lights cut through the deepening twilight. They found Mark's Peterbilt. It was parked meticulously on the shoulder of the dirt track, engine off, keys still in the ignition. The doors were unlocked. His logbook was open on the passenger seat. His wallet and cell phone were tucked away in a small compartment, untouched. The valuable fuel tanker was still hooked up, its contents secure. There was no sign of Mark Jensen. No struggle, no broken glass, no blood, no footprints leading off into the scrub except those of a lone coyote that had likely sniffed around the abandoned vehicle. It was as if he had simply vanished into the dry, whispering air. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity against an indifferent backdrop. Sheriff Thompson, alongside a small team of deputies, began the grim task. The FBI was called in, their resources stretched thin by the sheer scale of the desert. Search and rescue teams deployed, 9 units scouring the rugged terrain, helicopters buzzing overhead like oversized insects, their powerful lights cutting swathes through the darkness, then later, the brutal daylight. Temperatures routinely soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert swallowed sounds, scents, and hope whole. They covered miles of the sun-baked earth, their eyes straining against the glare, looking for any trace. A dropped cap, a discarded wrapper, a disturbance in the sand. Nothing. It was a blank canvas, wiped clean by nature's relentless hand. The theories circulated: a voluntary disappearance, a sudden medical emergency leading him to wander off, an abduction, a planned vanishing act. But Mark Jensen was not the type to abandon his life. He loved Sarah, he adored his children. His financial records were clean. There was no known gambling debt, no secret life, no reason for him to simply walk away from everything he held dear. Sarah, meanwhile, was a ghost of her former self. She gave tearful interviews to local news channels, her voice raw with grief and desperation, holding up photos of Mark's smiling face. Emily and David, too young to fully grasp the permanence, asked daily, "When is Daddy coming home?" The community rallied, friends and neighbors organizing their own searches, plastering missing posters with Mark's face on every gas station, diner, and post office across Arizona. But as days bled into weeks and weeks into months, the initial fervor faded. The desert held its secrets tight. The case, without any new leads, slowly, inevitably, went cold. Sheriff Thompson never truly let it go. Mark Jensen's file sat on a shelf, a constant, nagging presence in his office. Every now and then he'd pull it down, flip through the dusty pages, reread the witness statements, pore over the aerial maps, hoping a fresh pair of eyes would reveal something missed. But there was nothing new, just the same frustrating emptiness. The Jensen family tried to move on, to build a new normal around the gaping hole Mark had left. Sarah got a job, learned to manage the household and the kids alone. Emily grew into a quiet, introspective teenager, David a boisterous young man who sometimes lashed out at the unfairness of it all. Birthdays, Christmases, graduations, all milestones celebrated with an unspoken void, a phantom presence. The Peterbilt was eventually released from impound, its tanker emptied, and sold to cover Mark's company's losses, a tangible piece of him erased. 15 years bled into the desert sands. 2008 became 2023. Technology had advanced dramatically. Sarah Jensen was now Sarah Miller, having remarried a kind, understanding man named Greg, who loved her children as his own. The ache for Mark was still there, a dull throb beneath the surface, but life had moved on. The children were adults now, Emily in college, David working construction. Sheriff Thompson had retired, passing the badge to a younger generation, including Detective Alex Miller, no relation to Sarah's new husband, a sharp, methodical officer known for his relentless pursuit of truth. Then, on a Tuesday morning in September 2023, the phone rang at the Mohave County Sheriff's Office. The call came through on an untraceable burner phone, routed through multiple proxies, making it impossible to pinpoint its origin. Detective Miller was on duty. The voice on the other end was rough, distorted, almost a whisper, laced with an unsettling urgency. "I got something for you about that truck driver, Jensen, from 15 years back." Miller, whose desk held a stack of cold case files, including Mark Jensen's, leaned forward. "Who is this? What do you know?" A pause, a ragged breath. He didn't just walk away. "Nobody walks away from that kind of setup." The voice crackled, cutting in and out. "Listen close. You remember that old mining road off 93, the one where they found his rig? There's a turnoff couple miles north of it, just before the big rock formation that looks like a skull. Follow that dirt track east for maybe a mile. There's a wash, deeper than it looks. Near the biggest ironwood tree on the south side, there's something buried, something that doesn't belong." Miller scribbled frantically, his heart pounding. The voice was specific, eerily so. "What is it? What exactly am I looking for?" Another pause, longer this time. The distortion worsened. "It'll tell you who else was out there. He wasn't alone. Look for the star." The line went dead. Detective Miller spent the next few days meticulously cross-referencing the anonymous tip with the original case files. The big rock formation that looks like a skull was vague enough to be almost anywhere in that region, but combined with the specific mining road and wash, it began to narrow the search area. He consulted with retired Sheriff Thompson, whose eyes widened when he heard the details. "Skull Rock," Thompson mused. "There's a formation north of the old Black Dog mine access. I know exactly the one. We searched there, but not that far east on that specific track." A new search was authorized, this time with ground-penetrating radar and more sophisticated mapping techniques than had been available in 2008. The terrain was still brutal, the heat still unforgiving, but the focus was razor-sharp. Miller led a small team, navigating the winding, almost forgotten dirt tracks. They found the rock formation, its weathered crags indeed resembling a grotesque skull against the azure sky. They located the specific wash, dry and dusty, cutting a deep scar through the landscape. And on its south side, a majestic, ancient ironwood tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like wizened arms. The GPR indicated a disturbance, a shallow burial just beneath the surface, near the base of the ironwood. Digging cautiously, the team unearthed a small, heavy object. It wasn't a body. It wasn't Mark's wallet or his phone. It was a custom-made, heavy-duty belt buckle, crafted from polished steel, depicting a five-pointed star, not a sheriff's badge, but a unique, stylized design, almost rustic, with a small, distinct chip on one of its points. It was not Mark Jensen's, and it was clearly very old, probably from another era, possibly some kind of trucker or biker club insignia, or a custom piece from a specific region. The earth had preserved it, but it bore the faint marks of rust and degradation. The discovery sent a jolt of electricity through the cold case. This wasn't some random piece of trash. This was a deliberate burial, a planted clue, or perhaps an accidental loss during some long-ago clandestine event. The anonymous caller's reference to the star was chillingly precise. It confirmed the call's authenticity and shattered the prevailing theory of a simple disappearance. Mark Jensen hadn't just walked away. He hadn't just had an accident. Someone else was out there. Someone else was present when Mark Jensen vanished, and someone, 15 years later, decided to whisper a clue from the shadows. The investigation was re-energized. Forensic specialists were meticulously analyzing the buckle, hoping to extract DNA or trace elements that could tie it to a person or a specific location. Detective Miller reached out to trucking associations, biker clubs, and historical societies across Arizona and Nevada, trying to identify the unique star insignia. Old police reports from the late 90s and early 2000s were scoured for any mention of similar buckles or individuals associated with such an emblem. Sarah, now in her late 50s, received the news with a mixture of overwhelming relief and renewed pain. The uncertainty had been a slow poison, but this new information, while terrifying, offered a glimmer of hope, a potential path to answers. "He wasn't alone," she repeated, the words a bittersweet echo of the anonymous caller's revelation. Someone knows what happened to Mark." The Arizona desert, vast and silent, still held the ultimate truth. But now, after 15 years of quiet, a single, anonymous voice had stirred its ancient sands, bringing forth a fragment of a lost story, a piece of a puzzle that finally, excruciatingly, was beginning to take shape. The case of Mark Jensen was no longer just a missing person. It was an active investigation into a crime, one that had been hidden by the desert's formidable silence, now partially illuminated by the faint gleam of a forgotten, rusted star. The search for Mark Jensen continued, but it was no longer a search for a wandering man. It was a hunt for a ghost and the living shadows who might have put him there. The desert watched, silent and unblinking, as the wheels of justice, long dormant, slowly began to turn once more.